I never thought I'd hear those words come out of my mother-in-law's mouth, not in a million years, and definitely not aimed at my 6-year-old daughter. But there I was, standing in the crowded, twinkling gym of Lily's elementary school, and Margaret, my mother-in-law, perfectly polished, impeccably dressed, her smile sharp as a knife, leaned toward Lily and said, "Children from mommy's cheating don't get to call me grandma." The words hung in the air like a guillotine, and for a moment, the entire room froze. I could feel every parent turn toward us, eyes wide, mouths tightening into horrified grimaces. Even the teacher, Ms. Ramirez, stopped smiling mid-handshake. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I wanted to melt into the floor, to erase the moment, but I couldn't. My daughter, Lily, held out her small handmade ornament, still glittering from the craft table, her little hands trembling, her eyes searching for approval. And Margaret, cold, calculating Margaret, just pushed it aside. The rejection stung more than anything I've ever felt. I could see the confusion flicker across Lily's face, that pure, innocent belief that Grandma would always love her. And then came the words I'll never forget. This was supposed to be a joyful school holiday event. Kids were laughing, parents were chatting, ornaments sparkled on tables, and the faint smell of cinnamon and hot chocolate filled the room. But in one sentence, Margaret turned it into a battlefield. I felt my stomach drop. I thought of all the times I'd tried to keep the past hidden, the mistakes, the affair I had never confessed, and how suddenly it had been weaponized in front of my children. How could she say something so cruel, so pointed, so publicly humiliating? How could she use my 6-year-old as a pawn in her own bitterness? And then I looked around. The other parents were whispering, shifting uncomfortably, trying not to stare. The teacher, who usually radiated warmth, had gone pale, unsure what to do. My heart raced, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. I wanted to speak, to defend my child, but something stopped me. I was frozen in shock, trapped between rage and helplessness. Before I could even take a breath, before I could think of the right words or the right move, my son, Max, 8 years old, stood up. He faced Margaret, his small shoulders squared, his voice surprisingly steady for his age, and said something that made the entire room go dead silent. I thought Margaret had gone too far, way too far, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm she was about to unleash. The words she spat at Lily were cruel enough, but the way she did it. Leaning in, cold eyes fixed on my daughter, a smirk twisting her lips, made it feel personal, surgical even. I wanted to shout, to grab Lily and run, but instead I froze, heart pounding, while the echoes of her insult hung in the air. Did she really just say that to a 6-year-old? In front of all these parents, these kids, this teacher? The audacity was breathtaking. Lily's small hand, still clutching her ornament, wavered. She didn't understand why Grandma would say something so mean. Her eyes searched mine for reassurance. My stomach twisted. How do you explain betrayal and family secrets to a child who only knows love? How do you protect innocence when it's under attack? The gym, once a cheerful swirl of holiday cheer, now felt suffocating, like a stage for public humiliation. Every parent's gaze shifted subtly toward us. Some faces were shocked. Some confused. A few were silently judging. And Margaret? She just stood there, smug, as if she had won some twisted victory. I tried to steady my voice, to intervene gently, but my words felt weak, drowned out by the tension in the room. Then, the impossible happened. My son, Max, who was usually reserved and shy, rose from his seat. 8 years old, small for his age, but suddenly filled with a courage that made my chest ache with pride. He looked Margaret straight in the eye and said, "You're wrong. Mommy didn't cheat on anyone." The words were simple, innocent in their clarity, but in that moment, they carried the weight of a thunderclap. The entire room froze. Parents stopped talking mid-laugh. Teachers halted their instructions mid-sentence. Even the younger kids paused, sensing something monumental had just happened. Margaret's smirk faltered, just slightly, as if she hadn't expected a child to speak back. And for the first time, I saw hesitation in her eyes, a crack in the armor of control she always wore so confidently. But the shock wasn't over. Because Margaret's next move, subtle but deliberate, would push the situation further than anyone could have imagined, and it would force me to make a choice I wasn't ready for. When children speak the truth, adults often stumble, and Margaret was about to prove it. The moment Max's words cut through the tension, the room seemed to tilt on its axis. Margaret's composure wavered, just for a heartbeat, and I could see the cold calculation behind her eyes shift into disbelief. She had expected silence, compliance, maybe even tears, but not confrontation. And from my 8-year-old son, of all people. "Mind your mouth, boy," Margaret hissed, her voice low but sharp enough to make everyone lean in. "You don't know what you're talking about." Her tone was meant to intimidate, to reassert dominance. But instead, it highlighted the audacity of her cruelty. And that's when I realized something crucial. This wasn't just about Lily, or me, or family reputation. It was about power. Margaret wanted control, and she would stop at nothing to remind us of our place. I stepped forward, though cautiously, my mind racing. How do you confront someone like her without creating a scene you can't control? My heart thumped painfully in my chest as I forced myself to stay calm. I could see the whispers ripple through the crowd, parents exchanging looks, some shocked, some silently filming. The teacher, Ms. Ramirez, shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to intervene without escalating the tension. Every second stretched into an eternity. Then something even more remarkable happened. Max, gripping Lily's hand tightly, didn't back down. He took a small but deliberate step closer to Margaret and said, "My sister made that ornament. You can't say that to her. You're just being mean." His voice, though small, rang with conviction. And Lily, inspired by her brother, piped up in her tiny, trembling voice, "I'm your granddaughter. You promised you'd love me." The innocence and honesty of those words struck harder than any adult argument could. The room shifted. Gasps and murmurs filled the gym. Parents leaned forward, some nodding in silent agreement, some glancing around in disbelief. Margaret's carefully constructed facade of authority was cracking before everyone's eyes. Her lips twitched, her hands gripped the table, but she couldn't find a word strong enough to silence them. And then, in that charged silence, I realized the confrontation wasn't over. Margaret's next move would be the most dangerous yet, something calculated, cold, and meant to humiliate all of us further. And I knew, deep down, that what she did next would shock every single person in the room. I thought the worst was over. Max and Lily had spoken. The crowd was watching, and Margaret had faltered, but I was wrong. Margaret had one final move left, and I could feel it in the way she straightened her posture, chin high, eyes sharp, calculating. She wasn't finished. She wanted to leave a mark, to reclaim control, to humiliate us in front of everyone. I could see her lips curve into that familiar, cold smirk, the kind that told me she had rehearsed this moment for years. "You'll never understand family loyalty," she said, her voice low but cutting. "You children are confused. You don't know what it means to belong to this family." Every word was deliberate, aimed like a dart at my children. I wanted to erupt, to tell her exactly what she was, but I reminded myself Lily was watching, and Max had just shown courage I had never seen before. This wasn't my fight alone, it was ours as a family. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm but firm, trying to assert authority over the chaos she was creating. "You've already confused them enough," I said. "It ends here." My words felt small, but somehow, in that charged silence, they carried weight. The parents, who had been murmuring and shifting, now leaned in, watching the showdown unfold. Some nodded subtly, others exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the children's bravery and my attempt to protect them. Max held Lily's hand, his small fingers gripping hers tightly. Then he said something I will never forget. "Grandma or not, she loves us, and that's what matters." His voice rang through the room with surprising authority for an 8-year-old. Lily's eyes lit up as if a weight had been lifted. Her tiny hand held high, ornament glimmering, she beamed. In that moment, I realized that courage isn't about age, it's about heart. And my children had it in spades. Margaret froze. For the first time in decades, she had no reply, no comeback, no clever remark. Her smirk vanished, replaced by the barest flicker of uncertainty. The room was quiet, the tension almost tangible, as everyone waited for her next move. I could see her glancing around, realizing that the power she once wielded effortlessly had evaporated. But even in her silence, I knew the confrontation wasn't completely over. Margaret's next action, small, subtle, and calculated, was about to set the stage for the final, shocking conclusion. And I had no idea how it would play out. The silence hung in the room like a weight, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what would happen next. Margaret stood frozen, her carefully curated composure shattered by the honesty and bravery of two children who refused to be intimidated. My heart was pounding, relief mixing with lingering anger. The children, however, were radiant, pride and courage glowing from every corner of their small faces. Lily held her ornament high, Max stood tall beside her, and I realized, in that instant, that their courage had outshone any cruelty Margaret could muster. Margaret didn't speak again. Slowly, deliberately, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the polished gym floor, leaving behind a room full of stunned parents and teachers. Some whispered under their breath, others shook their heads, but no one spoke aloud. I could feel the tension drain from my shoulders, replaced by a bittersweet satisfaction. The children had won not through anger, not through revenge, but through truth and unshakable innocence. I knelt beside Lily, brushing the hair from her face, and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." She smiled, a mixture of relief and triumph shining through her tear-brimmed eyes. Max grinned at me too, that small confident smile that made me believe that no one, not even Margaret, could take away their sense of self-worth. I realized something important in that moment. Protecting your children isn't about shielding them from cruelty, it's about giving them the strength to face it head-on, to speak truth even when the world seems against them. Looking around at the room, I saw parents quietly nodding, some recording on their phones, others wiping tears from their eyes. Ms. Ramirez approached and gave me a small, knowing smile. "They handled that beautifully," she said. And I knew she wasn't just talking about the children, she was talking about all of us who had silently endured Margaret's presence over the years. As I left the school that evening, ornament in hand and children at my side, I reflected on what had just happened. Some people will try to define you, to shame you, to control you, but love and courage define themselves. My children had reminded me of that in the most powerful way imaginable. And as for Margaret, she may never change, but that's her choice. And our family's love, our resilience, would always be stronger. If you've ever witnessed family drama explode in public or seen your child stand up for what's right, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of courage, truth, and the unexpected power of children. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the loudest message.